Coming up next on WNIN Lawmakers, the Indiana General Assembly session is a little past the halfway mark now. Indiana State Representative Ryan Hatfield joins us to discuss how things are shaping up. WNIN Lawmakers starts right now. Welcome to WNIN Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson, news manager and local host of WNIN FM's Morning Edition. Before we check in with Representative Hatfield, here's a report from Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith on what happened in the General Assembly this past week.
The retail dog sales bill requires pet stores to register with the state and only sell dogs from breeders and brokers who meet a canine care certification program developed by Purdue University, with some exceptions for smaller operations. Supporters say it ensures high standards. Opponents argue those standards are vague and the bill undercuts local decisions. Legislation advancing in the Senate sets guidelines for armed intruder drills in schools that include accommodating students who have mobility restrictions or other types of limitations. It also restricts drills that include sensory components, like fake gunshots or a prop firearm, from taking place during regular school hours when a majority of students are present. And recovery community organizations, which often provide peer-based recovery support services and community outreach and education programs, could be certified by the state under a bill that cleared a Senate committee. That certification, based on national standards, would allow those organizations to have more access to sustainable funding. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
We're joined now by Indiana State Representative Ryan Hatfield, whose district encompasses a large portion of Evansville. As always, Representative Hatfield, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Good to have you. Well, let's talk about some of the bills that have already passed out of the House, your chamber, and are now being considered by the Senate. House Bill 1019 looked to restrictions on child-operated stands. It passed the House unanimously, rather. Obviously, you voted for it. Can you tell us what are the merits of this bill?
You know, I think that there is a kind of more than normal array of bills dealing with child safety standards in a number of different areas, and this is one of those efforts, and I thought that it was a positive initiative, move forward, a bipartisan bill that will continue into the Senate, but just very generally, John, it is one of many bills this session, more than most sessions, where child standards and safety standards are being increased and improved.
Any idea on why we're seeing so many bills about child safety?
Well, I cynically hope that it is not an effort to mask the deep problems we have with DCS and the foster care system and the number of children we're seeing fall through the cracks in a judicial system that has not been able to keep up. Just the mere number of problems we're seeing in so many communities for so many reasons that I hope it's not to mask those issues, but no, I think that the more we know, the more we find out about these safety standards, the more we realize they need to be updated. And this state has not done a very good job at updating them over time. And I think that lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are starting to realize, hey, perhaps we need to look at this again.
Well, here's one that got a lot of attention, House Bill 1093. It looks to roll back some child labor laws by allowing teens to have fewer restrictions on working. It passed the House, but you voted against it. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, so as we see this kind of cadre of bills that improve safety standards, we're also seeing an effort to reduce workforce standards involving minors. And there are two primary bills, one that passed the House that you mentioned, one that we just voted on in Judiciary Committee this week, and I voted for that bill. And so the first bill I thought reduced the standards that we have put in place for minors working and allowed them to work overnight in certain situations that I thought was a little too broad. And so with the right parameters on that bill, I probably could have been supportive of it. I'm supportive of young people working. I first got a job when I was 13 years old and have been working ever since, most of that time, 2 jobs ever since. And so I think it's a positive for our young people to be working. We just want to make sure that we have some safeguards in place to make sure employers aren't abusing those minor workers. This week, we voted on a bill that would ease the restrictions in restaurant settings, and I voted for that bill and was supportive of that effort.
Okay. Okay, tell us a little bit more about that one. Strictly restaurants we're talking about?
Restaurants and like facilities that would allow for minors. It changed the date, the start and end date of their employment, which will impact employers and their ability to get them in and get them signed up for summer jobs and things like that. It also reduced some of the restrictions around who can serve what, and allowing 18-year-olds to serve alcohol rather than 19. We were on the high end of where states are, and our restaurants came to us and said, look, we don't have enough workers. And these young folks are willing to work, and they're good workers. And we don't want them to pour the alcohol. We don't want them to work behind the bar. Right. But if somebody else pours it, we would like them to be able to pick it up and move it over to a table. And so we reduce that by a year. And the restaurant industry tells us that'll be a big improvement for them, just as far as workforce problems they're seeing.
I see. Well, let's move on to another bill here that talks about education. It's an education bill. In fact, it's House Bill 1001. It would allow 21st century scholar funds to be used for a wider variety of post-secondary education and training programs. You did vote in favor of that one, as I understand it. Can you tell us more about it and why you voted yes?
Sure, and I joined the majority party in voting for this bill. There were only, I think, a few Democrats who did, and I did so because I believed that those funds are available, and we're seeing good use out of them. And a 21st Century Scholars Fund, my wife benefited from being a 21st Century Scholar, and so it's certainly important to protect those funds. But what we're seeing is that the job market is broader than it used to be, and that there's a lot of different avenues out of high school, and we wanted to ensure that some of those funds can be used for other pathways that don't simply push them into a college setting, but if a young person has good grades and has done the right thing and wants to use it for a trade program that may require some upfront cost or another avenue, that we encourage them to seek those opportunities as well. And so I joined the majority party. I thought that it was a small step that some might worry about those funds. I also worry about the 21st Century funds, but I thought, in this economy, there are so many avenues out of high school that we want to support all of our Hoosier children.
Let's talk a little bit, if you could, a little background on 21st Century Scholar Funds. Basically, what are they? Where do they come from?
Sure. They support young people who are, for one reason or another, in a certain financial situation, and is there for them to help keep them on the educational path that they choose. But however, they've been used for higher education opportunities. This simply broadens that a little bit to say, you may not choose a certain college, but you may choose a trade program. And we know in this part of the state that those trade programs result in really great jobs, professional, career-driven jobs that pay a good wage. And so I thought it was, particularly for Southern Indiana, an important program.
All right, well, let's move on to another public safety measure here. I think we're all familiar with Amber Alerts, Silver Alerts. But House Bill 1021 would add something called Green Alerts for at-risk veterans. It passed the House unanimously. So basically, what does this measure do, and why do you feel there's a need for it?
Yeah, so this is really a cool idea that came from the Amber Alert system that simply, in a day and age where so many adults are struggling with the impact of their service because we spent so many years in so many places around the country, and we have so many folks right now who have come back from Iraq or Afghanistan or someplace else in the world and are still struggling with the effects of that service. And Indiana has done a pretty good job at trying to ensure that we're there for them, and done some tax things and some employment issues. But what we haven't done is create a safety mechanism to say when things aren't going well, when they're missing, we want to make sure that we're able to get that out to the public and make people aware of that program, make people aware of the program, but make people aware of when a veteran is struggling, that we're able to find that person and get them the help and resources that they need to get back to what they do best and get back to life in this state. And so was really proud to support that effort and hope that it is a tool, too, for the Veterans Court here in Vanderburgh County, that when a veteran is struggling, we want to make sure that we have every opportunity to get that person before the worst happens. Mm-hmm. And this is a great program that will allow us to do that.
All right. Well, let's look a little bit here at guns, always a big issue. House Bill 1084 has to do with keeping records of firearm sales. Could you explain, what it does and why you support that particular bill?
This particular effort was an effort passed by the majority that was, I found to be a small step that ensured that we are that we're not unfairly treating gun owners. And so what that legislation said was that a government entity can't keep lists of gun owners. Okay. And John, I got to tell you, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, if you're an American, you really probably prefer the government not to keep you on a list. And that is necessary from time to time. I've supported efforts that give locals opportunities to do some security things around that. But in this particular case, I thought that it was a positive step to ensure that hunters and folks who simply are law-abiding citizens and doing the right thing aren't needlessly dealing with government intervention or interference.
Any concern there that this would perhaps, deregulate too much, that it would perhaps, cause more guns to be on the street and that kind of thing?
I don't, and the reason I don't is because of kind of the framework we have in this state. And so I don't think we have it perfect in this state, but this particular bill didn't deal with the permitting issues or other issues that we've dealt with in the past. And so under the current framework, I didn't feel it was appropriate for the Attorney General to simply keep people on a list having done no wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to a joint resolution that came up this session. It called on Congress to call for a constitutional convention to impose term limits. Apparently, you supported that measure. What are your thoughts on that?
Institutional knowledge is very important. However, I have found in my service and in my dealings with Congress through my role as a state representative that term limits may be a good reminder to folks that when you hold a seat in the legislature, particularly in this case in Congress, that you don't own that seat. And that it's not yours simply there to become a billionaire. And so I have supported this effort, and I think that the resolution was to ensure that we're able to have that conversation at the national level, that are term limits appropriate, and when are they appropriate, and for how long. And I think turnover is good, and I am skeptical that we will see that move forward, but I thought that it was a good message to send to Washington, D.C., because I've been very frustrated out of both parties out of Washington, D.C.
Well, can you tell me, what would you suggest? 12 years for House, 12 years for Senate, or any particular numbers that you'd like to see?
I don't have a particular number, John, but I'll tell you that after 8 years, I've decided not to run for re-election. I am going off to do something else, but I also think that turnover is positive, and it's good to get new ideas and fresh faces. And so I'll stay out of which number is the right number. If the mission right now is to get enough states to work towards that.
Yeah, just to get a conversation going.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to House Bill 1383. It became the first bill of the session that was actually signed by the governor. It reduces the number of protected wetlands. This has gotten quite a bit of discussion. It was a tweak to a law that was passed back in 2021. Can you explain the measure and why you voted against it?
Yeah, look, this state is a vibrant state because of the varying different communities and landscapes that we have. And we don't have mountains and we don't have beaches. And so I thought that it was really important to preserve the ecosystems that we do have that create life here in the state of Indiana, and those are in large part through wetlands. And locally, I've been proud to support legislation. In fact, I authored legislation that enabled the expansion of Wesselman Park, and we know that those ecosystems are good not only for our animal life, but also for our tourism and attracting businesses and people to the state of Indiana. And so I felt that it was not a good idea to reduce the wetlands in the state of Indiana for a whole host of reasons.
Mm-hmm. Also, we should probably mention, we do have beaches up north, of course, on Lake Michigan. So we do have that. But
we do have Lake Michigan, and in fact, the prior administration really did a great service to the state of Indiana by making it a national park up there.
Right, right. All right. Well, let's move on to some other issues that have been coming up in the General Assembly. Maybe you can share with us some of the hearings and committees that you've been to regarding some of the Senate's bills and what you think about some of the bills coming out of the Senate.
Yeah, so, there's an interesting kind of battle going on right now between the House and the Senate, and that is not uncommon as we get into the late parts of session. However, it seems a little pettier this year, quite frankly, and that's not between political parties, that's between chambers. And so I think there's some gamesmanship going on that we haven't quite seen the results of. But from what I can tell, the bills coming over from the Senate in the second half, they're less broad than what the House sent over, but also there's some good initiatives. There's some good crime bills that I think will see the light of day in the House, and some other efforts around education that could have some positive impacts. But also, it won't surprise, there's a lot of bad bills that come over too, and we'll have to deal with those as they come. But so far, it feels like normal fare coming from the Senate. Yeah.
Of course, this is a short session, not a budget session. Are there too many bills crammed into this short session? I'm guessing lots of things will fall by the wayside, right?
Definitely, and the leadership pretty much announced from the get-go that this was going to be a know-nothing session, and we were going to tweak some things but not do big things. Depending on who you are and what industry you work on, you may agree with that or not agree with that. I know there are some folks. But John, if I could just mention, the state of Indiana at the end of the year announced a $1 billion shortfall, basically $1 billion missing from FSSA, and has a huge impact on families with disabled loved ones. And to me, this is the biggest issue of the session that is not being addressed. Simply just MIA from the state's leadership on what we're going to do about the $1 billion problem created by FSSA, and that are leaving Hoosier disabled folks really out in the cold as far as funding goes. And so I have called on the state and the leadership to address this issue, and the lieutenant governor has done a wonderful job at highlighting this issue and really banging her fist and saying, look, we created this problem, we need to fix this problem and be there for the most vulnerable Hoosiers in the state. And so far it's crickets in the legislature, the House, the Senate. There just isn't a lot moving on that front, and it's really disappointing to see. To me, that's the biggest issue that needs to be addressed in the second half.
Does it appear that that's going to be pushed off to the budget session next year?
It feels that way, and for those that may say it belongs in a budget session, I'd really argue it doesn't belong in a budget session. Budget sessions are for creating the biennial budget and appropriating funds. This is $1 billion that the administration essentially shorted or lost. And there isn't a whole lot of information coming from FSSA about where this money went or why they short-handed themselves and didn't provide any expectation to the state that they were $1 billion short. We need to have an audit. We voted this week, and it failed in the House. I was disappointed. I supported an audit of SSSA to say, hey, what happened here? Every single day in the General Assembly, Hoosier disabled friends from all over the state come to us and say, please fix this. My funding's going to get cut off. I'm going to lose my caretaker, my necessary caretaker. I may not be able to survive without my caretaker. And the funding cuts that will be necessary due to this $1 billion shortfall are going to prevent me from doing that. And I hope that somebody wakes up and realizes we have to be there for disabled Hoosiers.
You alluded to this earlier, and we just have a couple of minutes left. You announced that you're not running for another term at the State House. I guess a chance for you to just share with us some of your thoughts as you wrap up your last session.
You know, it's been a wonderful experience. I'd like to thank my constituents. There was a House resolution honoring my service this week, and kind of each retiring legislator gets one. And I thanked my constituents, and I'll do it here. I've been so blessed to have served the people of Evansville and Indianapolis and been proud of some of the things that we've done on health care and on trying to work towards lower energy bills and trying to create an environment in this part of the country where if you come here and you're willing and able to work, that you can get a job that pays you a good wage. And I think that we've made big advancements in my time, but it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful to my constituents for electing me and allowing me to be their voice in Indianapolis. It's been a great honor.
We certainly appreciate you coming to visit us many times during your tenure there. That is State Representative Ryan Hatfield. As always, we appreciate you coming in and joining us on Lawmakers. Next week, our scheduled guest on the program is Indiana State Senator Mark Messmer. I'm John Gibson of WNIN FM. Thank you for watching WNIN Lawmakers.